Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jasmine Williams, and I'd like to share with you all this morning a declaration of well-being written by Anne Mortifee and thought partners of hundreds of people from around the world who poured into this declaration, and Anne Mortifee was able to condense it into one solid statement that I think that we all can look to in absorbing the spirit of what this summit is. So I'll be performing Anne's declaration piece and then a response poem to that. A spirit of promise is calling us inward to see ourselves clearly, to heal what needs healing and bring harmony back to the earth. We feel it in the depth of our nature and rise to the call of life's urge to evolve. We are pathfinders, caregivers, weavers of dreams, pilgrims on a journey to discover the self. From every walk of life, every faith, race, and culture, the sounds of our footsteps are heard. Inspired by the ones who traveled before us, we press on for the ones yet to follow, moved by an ancient vision of a more compassionate world. We seek well-being for all of creation, for love and justice, peace and truth, to thrive and enliven us all. We have learned that the light which ignites the stars is the same light that flows through all things. We are sparks in the body of a mighty creation, born to imagine what once seemed impossible. Together, we cast a rainbow of hope, kindling thoughts and ideas to quicken, unfold, and transform from deep, deep within. We know we belong to this dream that is wanting to be. Adventure with us, and with patient resolve, we will heal our own hearts to bring health to the whole. We are warriors, advocates, lovers of truth. We are change makers, storytellers, bringers of beauty. We commit ourselves to well and at peace for this vast, most mysterious world. Thank you. By Anne Mortifee. "97% of human DNA is shared with stardust. In our very fingertips are 4 billion years of supernova deaths and rebirths that traveled at the speed of light, carrying in their dance between comets a paintbrush dipped in evidence of consciousness that culminated in these bodies on this earth, holding a celestial wisdom so ancient humanity begs the questions, why here, now, why me? We spend our lives uncovering the answers, moment by moment, falling in love over and over again, each time remembering more of who we are, like lifting the veils off of souls, only to find clear mirrors beneath deep-bellied laughs, shared over evening meals, uncensored elders and babies taking their first steps, and sometimes with even more subtlety, like the sweet fragrance of a stranger that fills your lungs in brisk passing, reminding you how easy it is to belong to one another, if even just for a second, moving us closer to a truth that requires no breaking discovery or degrees or wars in its name. Truth only requires remembrance. You know it when you hear it, because it feels like light in your eyes, Like a world could emerge from your throat, like waterfalls could cascade from your resting shoulders, like the wind in your ears while riding a bike for the first time, your fingers slipping between the hands you love, like walking out of a storm into a warm living room, like coming home to the aroma of your favorite dinner. It feels like coming home. Truth feels like coming home. The one all humans come from, the one that speaks in a currency of love and connection, transcends corruption, defies fear and greed and violence, and says with all its light that the pursuit of power paid for in blood is a waste of an incarnation. And yet apathy is not of the sky. So truth seekers and caretakers, dreamers and creators, nation builders and reformers, we meet the world at the crack of its eye to whisper in a tongue unique to our purpose, there is nothing the descendants of stars lack. Billions of years of space and time are held in our frames, with resources beyond our wildest vision boards and ROIs, beyond oil and diamonds and exploited labor, larger than global hunger, bigger than burnout and sacrificial salaries. We are connected to the source, activated by rest and nourishment and the caress of silence between births of inspired awareness and deaths of dogma and ego. These bodies we inhabit are worthy of love and grace, matching intentionality of stars we come from. We are worthy of all that we so passionately pursue for others. In fact, quiet as kept, our restoration is essential to our remembrance. And our remembrance is essential to freedom. As we become more free in ourselves, we slowly free the world, bearing witness to the miracle of one another, like comets illuminating the dust that flew off the Big Bang to travel to the edge of the universe for 4 billion years and create us. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. That was Akash Udedra, solo dancer, and this piece was named Constellation to open our discussion on spirituality. My name is Zainab Salbi. I'm the founder of Women for Women International and co-founder of Daughters for Earth. And like many of you, I've dedicated my life to doing good in the world, to service, to being in service to the most marginalized people in the world. And 3 years ago, just short of 3 years ago, I was rushed into the hospital for finding a quarter of a gallon of liquid pressing on my heart. And in the midst of the operations and the ICU and the doctors and the nurses, there was a moment in which I thought, this is it. I'm taking my last breath. And in that intimate moment, which I believe all of us are going to encounter, the conversation was not, did I accomplish enough? Was not, did I do enough good in the world? Did I have enough in the world? It was kindness. Did I live my life in kindness to myself and to others? Did I live my life in love to myself and to others? And the truth is, for so much part of my life, actually, I thought of kindness and love to the larger others, but to myself, or to even the others that are in front of me, my colleagues, my neighbors, my friends. You don't pay as much attention to that. And the experience took me, which dismantled all my shields, because, these things it's not that they didn't matter, I'm still in service. But they introduce a new conversation. How is this being in service is a holistic experience where I am becoming what I'm advocating for. The kindness and love is in me as much as I'm giving it in others. And I spent the following years meditating, gardening, walking in trails. And what I discovered one day, I woke up with ultimate joy, absolute joy, for realizing that there is such a thing as profound connection to our hearts. I thought of my heart as having a hand, holding my hand and saying, don't leave me again. And a profound connection to nature, and a profound connection to each other as a result. And what I don't talk about often, because it has a bad rep, a profound connection to God. To God, and God has such a bad reputation, and it's a controversial discussion because there's so many oppressions in the world in the name of God. I'm a women's rights activist, and right now a lot of women's rights are being taken in the name of God. So how do we reconcile between the oppression that is happening in that and between my own experience of true love to God, to the divine? And I think this reconciliation a lot of people are struggling with. And so this is the theme of our panel here today. So allow me to introduce my panelists. And I will start with Rabbi David Rosen, who's Chief Rabbi David Rosen, who is actually amazing CV, including he's the International Director of Interreligious Affairs of the American Jewish Committee. And most notably, he was, in November 2005, Pope Benedict made Rabbi Rosen a Knight of the Order of St. Gregory the Great, and Queen Elizabeth, what is it? Made him, exactly. I was like, Commander of the British Empire for his contributions to interfaith and religion. So what an honor. Thank you. Please, thank you for giving me tips. You sit here. And then after that, Father Timothy Radcliffe, who comes from from the Dominican order and has a rich history in teaching in Oxford University, University of London, many books, including one that got translated in 24 languages, which is called Alive, Alive in God, a Christian Imagination. So welcome, Father Timothy. And then, last but not least, Imam Saeed Razawi, a British scholar of religion and Chief Imam and Director General of the Scottish Ahlul Bayt Society. He's also associate and a director at Harvard University's Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, as well as visiting scholar at the University of Slidell. Okay, so come on in. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, pleasure conversing with all of you. I mean, and having read your bios and all of that, I think one of the things that unite you all is your commitments for reconciliation and for love and to take us back to the origin of what is religion and what is God and all of that. But before I go into this, because we have issues with religion these days, right? I mean,
especially us.
Right? So the question is, what is the relevance of religion for the modern day women and men? And I want to start with the oldest religion, with you, Rabbi.
Well, thank you, Zainab. It's a great joy to be here, both with my colleagues, with you, and with everyone in the audience. Of course, the question begs a definition. And there is a British sociologist, Douglas Martin, I think his name is, who refers to religion in terms of 3 B's: belief, behavior, and belonging. And I think this is very helpful in the very short time I have to deal with a very big subject, to be able to put those into headlines. The wonderful thinker William James, in the end of the 19th century, wrote an essay that was published called The Will to Believe. And what he was arguing is that the most important things in terms of our emotional well-being are precisely things that are not objectively demonstrable or scientifically provable. Things like love, friendship, loyalty. If you don't have a belief in that which transcends the immediate corporeal context, you have therefore nothing to reach out, to strive for, to connect with. And that if you go about life, for example, at staying friendship, being suspicious of anyone, and you've got maybe good reason, logical reason to be suspicious, but then your life is going to be a pretty miserable one. You're not going to be even somebody who people want to have as a friend. So aspiring from that is precisely that which ennobles you. When you strive for the most noble, you can mostly ennoble yourself. And therefore, what we orientate ourselves towards has a big impact upon us. And that's supported by the wonderful study done by Bob Rosenberg in Harvard in '63, known as the Pygmalion effect, where in fact, if you project a certain image, then people are more likely to be inspired by it. And that refers to you too, if you therefore aspire for that which is the most noble. William James had an additional comment that people said, well, your hopes may be disproved. And he would say, I far prefer dupery through hope than dupery through fear.
That's true.
And that is, I think, people without that sense of the transcendent in their life are people who are very limited, very often victims of fear and of depression. And when you can aspire for the transcendent, your life is so much more wonderful. And therefore, it seems to me so sad that there are people who do not sense the transcendent in their lives. I feel it, and for me, it means a daily blessing. So that's the belief dimension. Maybe I could just add from Groucho Marx's comment, another profound philosopher. Anybody who's never been taken for a ride has never been on a journey worth taking. But then you have the issue of behavior. And that has to do with ethics and morals. Now, you don't have to be a religious person to be moral. But what is your foundation? People know the golden rule that appears in the book of Leviticus, written, 3,000 years ago or maybe more. Love your neighbor as yourself. But it doesn't end there. It's love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. What does that mean? It means that our neighbor is someone who has the divine within her or him. We use divine image or the divine spark or whatever it may be. And this is a recognition that while all life is sacred, and indeed I very much identify with Satish Kumar's comment about seeing the sacred in the world around us, in animal life, and not killing animals, let alone eating them, and not desecrating our environment. In fact, I would say all noble endeavors should be plant-based. All their events should be based on a plant-based diet. We shouldn't have any dead bodies as part and parcel of our activity. But beyond that, the ethical means seeing the transcendent in the other. And that gets its inspiration precisely from the religious dimension. That gives it such enormous power. But religion is also belonging. It means being part of community. There are very few structures that bring people together as beautifully, as consistently, as profoundly as religious communities. Now, these things can be found outside religious contexts, of course. But when you have all the wisdom and the richness of religious traditions, there is such a great offering there for people to be able to benefit from. I spend my life, as you've already described, in interreligious encounters. This, for me, is not only combating evil, misconceptions, stereotypes, building bridges. It's, for me, the discovery of the divine beyond my own religious tradition and heritage. And when I encounter people from different other works of life, I'm enriched, I'm ennobled. It's a great blessing.
It's beautiful. I mean, and you brought so many things, including evolution of concepts. You know, plant-based diet is not based on some traditional religious habits, but I like that. Yes. Okay, we can argue. In my tradition, we sacrifice the sheep for.
No, but that doesn't mean that the ideal might not be greater than that. In other words, all journey, even all religions are on a journey.
Yeah. I agree. I'm in agreement with you, actually. But I want to go to Father Timothy. I had the privilege of sharing lunch with you the other day and got to know your own journeys around the world, including my own home country, Iraq, which I really, truly appreciate, and your witnessing of different experiences, including youth experiences around the world and their relationship with religion. I go back with you to the question, why religion is still relevant to women and men of the modern day?
Thank you so much. And I think the most wonderful thing today is that whatever we say, the three of us are sitting together. The three of us, a rabbi, imam, a Catholic priest, in friendship. And that speaks volumes in a world in which so much religion is involved with violence. We, I hope, represent peace together. And it's a fascinating question. I went out to dinner with a friend of mine a few years ago, and halfway through, a Turkish restaurant, and he said to me, you know, I have this son, and he keeps saying, oh, what's the point of Christianity? What's it got to do with my life? Is it relevant to anything? And I got so obsessed with the question that I wrote a book called What is the Point of Christianity? Please do buy it. And then I met this friend a few years later, and a Thai restaurant this time, and he said, well, my son, yes, he liked that book, but he said, okay, so I can see roughly its relevance, but why go to church? So I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to write another book. And then my friend died, I lost contact with his son, which is just as well. Otherwise, I have to go on answering question after question. And in a certain sense, I hope this doesn't muck it all up. I don't think that the question is the relevance of religion. Because I think everything is relevant in relationship to God. You know, when you fall in love, you don't say, I'm in love and this is relevant, it'll give me good happiness. I had the great pleasure of having breakfast with Rabbi David's wife yesterday. He was there as well. And I'm sure that when you married her, you didn't say, I want to marry you because it'll be good for my mental health. It'll cure my loneliness. Because love is its own end. St. Augustine of Hippos, a theologian, North African theologian, 1,500 years ago, and he said, love, love. Fall in love with love. And then you will meet God. And I think all the most important human activities are done for their own sake. We just had wonderful music just before we appeared on stage. And this whole days are filled with glorious music, which I think is done for its own sake. And any great art, dance, films, in a way, they define what is relevance for us, rather than being relevant to us. I don't know whether you heard of Jacob Collier, an English singer. I kept listening to his music yesterday. And I think when you have creative artists, like so many of you are, they open the door to infinity. And I don't mind whether they're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or atheist. In their creativity, they open the door. And so they're our friends. All artists are the friends of religion because they help us to journey to the infinite. And I hope, David, you won't correct me, but when in the Hebrew Bible, Moses asks, what is the name of God? He says, I am. I am who I am. Not, I'm a very useful insurance policy. I am. And when we see another human being, I think our eyes are opened when we say, she is. I love what Satish Kumar said yesterday about HR, human resources, human relationships. The word I also hate is personnel. None of us are personnel. We're persons. And I think what religion does is to introduce you to the great gratuity of goodness. And yesterday we heard so much about also gratuitous violence. I think Louisa bowled us over when she talked about the suffering that she'd met, the death of her son. Or my friend Rajni, who I hope is here somewhere ready to cheer me on, when Rajni talked about all the violence of partition, the death of the Mahatma, all the violence in the Ukraine, and our hope lies in how this destructive, pointless violence is embraced by what you might say, a gratuitous goodness. Karl Barth, a great theologian, said, in the music of Bach, a great no is embraced with a resounding yes. So I think you're going to tell me to stop in a moment. So very last point, how do we move from that gratuitous violence to the yes that is creative? And I would say it is above all by seeing each other's faces. Can you be violent when you see another human being's face? I can't actually see your faces very clearly, but you can see mine, I hope, and all of ours. Marilyn Robinson, a great American novelist, said, look at the human face, it's courage, it's loneliness. You can't be violent when you see another face. And to finish, 2 seconds, once I was in Algeria, in the south of Algeria, in a car with a bishop. I always like to have bishops drive my cars, And it was a very small battered car, and we got caught up in violence. There was the Algerian army fighting against an uprising. Our car was surrounded by people with knives and guns. I thought it was the end. There was a young man standing in front of the car with a great stone over the windscreen. And I looked at his face. And his face was filled with hatred. But underneath the hatred, I saw a face filled with fear. And beneath that, I saw a face of somebody who his mother loved. Somebody lovable. And we looked at each other. And I think that's why I'm alive today.
Beautiful. And I have a million questions, but I'm going to hold myself because I really want to hear Imam say its response. You represent the Muslim, I can't say anybody represent any of the larger faith that you represent, but I'm curious from your experience, Imam, why and how religion is still relevant today in the lives of women and men of the modern time.
Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. It's always a blessing to be in the company of the wise And I think the answer lies there. The fact that we're all gathered here in our diversity. See, the question of religion, I guess, is as old as humanity itself. And I think originally there were 4 things that religion gave humanity. I think the first is quality of life. And that's what religion provided for people, is that quality of life, upliftment. The ability to share goodness, as we're doing today. Also at the same time, as you've heard, to share pain with one another. And that off-burdening of pain leads to a level of happiness. And so as we're here listening to each other, it gives me great joy, gives me great happiness to know that there are different perspectives. There's someone I can be here in friendship with to share my pain. But I guess at the same time, that when the first ever human being was suffering or was in pain or felt like sharing happiness, it was a matter of consciousness for them. That since there's been consciousness, there's always been a move towards something far greater than us, a movement towards the divine. Whatever you'd like to call it, and whichever label you want to put on it. If religion is about a movement towards a higher consciousness, or for example, religion is a movement towards the divine, then you find that all of us, 7 billion of us, are moving towards something. Each one of us gets up in the morning with a level of perfection. We brush our teeth, hopefully. We have a shower. Some of us may not. But the fact is we still put on perfume if we can do. We want to smell good. Why is that? It's because we're mimicking in our daily life beauty. From combing your hair, some of us have to shave, others don't. But in some movement of ours, early in the morning, and as we go on through the day, we're going towards a perfection of beauty. And at the same way, when you go outside and you see someone suffering, you see an old lady who can't cross the road, you go run, you help them cross that road. What are you doing effectively? Whether you're giving, whether you're sharing, whether you're showing compassion, whether you believe in God or not, what you're doing is you're mimicking the image of God. And so deep down inside of us, we all have God there. We're mimicking his or her characteristics in some shape or form. We're moving towards a level of perfection. So going back to the first thing I said, ever since humanity's been here, for whatever reason, we've been mimicking God, or that which we have in our mind, of the perfect, of the absolute. And so in this way, what does religion give us? Well, I guess the first thing religion gives us, as we've already heard, is correct behavior. It's how to interact with one another in the best of ways. It gives us structure. But I guess there's something more than that as well. We as human beings, we want to know 2 things. How does this work? Why does it work? Science may tell you the how, but it's religion that tells you the why. Why are we here for? It's a question. Why are we sitting here? Why are you here? Why are you and I in the pursuit of happiness? That's what we are. Everything comes back to one thing, happiness. Where do we find happiness? And you still find today that the vast majority of people, regardless of whether you call it religion or otherwise, are in the pursuit of happiness with something far greater than them. And if that's what you want to call God or the absolute, let's call it that. But whether you're meditating, or whether you're praying, or whether you're looking for reconciliation, or whether you're there to share your burdens, what are you doing? You're trying to move towards happiness, and there, happiness lies in something far greater. Now, when we look at the concept of emancipation, even within religion, some of our traditions talk about a messianic age. What is it? What are we looking at? Emancipation. From what? The shackles of slavery, or intellectual slavery, or mental slavery, or emotional slavery, or spiritual slavery? So what we do is, as humanity itself from the very beginning, look towards something greater. If we can call that religion, we see that there's a great relevance even today for that. Because there is a relevance in this world for peace, and harmony, and balance, and kindness, and virtue, and good behavior, but more so being one community. So finally, what does religion give me personally? It gives me hope. And that's why I'm here today. and I'm feeling it must give you hope as well. And this hope is essential, because without hope, humanity dies. That's the relevance of religion in the modern day.
Thank you. I mean, thank you so much for everyone. I have a million questions, because you all answered in the roots of religion, the essence, which is love and goodness. And yet, there's so many things happening in the name of religion, as I started, right? So I have a million questions. The role of women in religion, what's happening to women in the name of religion, or to other, or how our people even kill and hate each other in the name of religion, and so many aspects. But these discussions are going to happen in the afternoon, a session I definitely am planning to attend to hear the debate and be part of the debate about how do we reconcile between the essence and between the politics, if you may, of religion, right? And we need it for the world. And the three of your comments reminds me, honestly, where it took me back to Rumi poem, 13th century Sufi poet, and I don't have the poem entirety in my memory, but he starts with, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jewish, I'm Christian, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Baha'i, I'm Yazidi, I am breath. I am breath. And 20 years ago, I've always believed in that poem. I feel that my language happened to be Muslim language in my expression of that love. But I could have been born Jewish or Christian or Yazidi or Buddhist or anything. It doesn't matter. I would have expressed my love in that in that other language, right? And people's like, don't say that to anybody, it's dangerous. And I think now it's time for us to say that. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from all of you. The common thread in here is to go back to that essence. So to continue the conversation, I'm only sorry that we couldn't have that conversation now. We'll have to continue that in the afternoon session. I highly recommend it, because we do need it in our world and in our lives. And to close us, I'd like to invite Dr. Barry Gerson, who is a medical doctor, but he is also the representative of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who sent his personal message to all of us here at the Wellbeing Summit. So thank you for all of us, and we'll invite Dr. Barry Gerson. Please come on.
We stay here?
I don't know. Maybe we should go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're beautiful. We are very fortunate. We've been hearing some incredible people, incredible poetry and dance and music, and incredible spirituality from the heart. So we're very blessed. We've received a message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama about this summit. And I'd like to read for you, a few excerpts and make a few very brief comments. I mean, who am I to comment on His Holiness the Dalai Lama? He says he's very happy to know that the Wellbeing Summit for Social Change is being held in Bilbao these days. He says it's particularly encouraging to know that the focus will be a collective mission to expand upon human connection, community, and well-being. He says time moves on constantly. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. And education is the key factor in bringing this about. However, an education system oriented around only material goals, with little time for inner values, is inadequate when it comes to creating a happier, more peaceful world. There's no need to encourage, there is need. Sorry, Your Holiness. There is need to encourage greater warm-heartedness by including human values such as love, compassion, tolerance, honesty in the curriculum. What this means is learning to constrain our negative emotions, and I add, without suppressing them, while developing constructive ones. So to transform anger into patience or tolerance without suppressing, to transform jealousy into admiration and appreciation without suppressing, and to transform arrogance into humility, again without suppressing. He says it's good to remind ourselves, too, that all 7 billion human beings are the same, physically, mentally, and emotionally. If we allow ourselves to think in terms of us and them, we only fortify division. In this era of democracy and greater equality, this is unhelpful, us and them, and it's out of date. Reminding ourselves of the oneness of humanity, that we're all the same in being human, is on the other hand a great source of confidence and therefore well-being. So we have divisions. We have gender divisions, racial divisions, country of origin divisions, religion divisions, all kinds of divisions are there. They're there, but they're not very important. If we go deeper, what unites us, what's common to all of us, is the wish to be happy and not to hurt. So every time we meet someone, please remember that. She or he, just like me, just wants to be happy and doesn't want to hurt. And that relationship, even if it's a brief few words or even a smile, will be better. Even if it's a conflictual relation, it will be better. His Holiness goes on to say, there's a great and growing desire for change in the world. Change that ushers in a renewed commitment to ethical and spiritual values. We must resolve conflicts peaceably, employing dialogue and nonviolence, making our goal a demilitarized world. Such change involves upholding human rights and human dignity, as well as human responsibility. It means feeling a responsibility for the individuals, communities, and peoples who make up the human family as a whole. We require not only compassion for those who suffer, but also a commitment to share what we have with those in need. Let us widen our perspective to include the well-being of the whole world and its future generations in our vision of a happier future. With my prayers and good wishes, Tenzin Gyatso, the Dalai Lama. Thank you.
Good morning. Come on, guys. Did we not do this yesterday? Call, response. Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, a little better, a little better, a little better. One more. Good morning. Good morning. So much better. Thank you very much. It's great to see you all. I see there are stragglers who are sitting at the back. At some point, we will get you to move closer, be closer to the action, because there's something about holding an energy in a room. And the more dissipated it is, the harder it is to hold that energy in the room. So if you arrived a little late, don't worry, no judgment. We know yesterday was a late day, today was an early morning. But if you can just make your way closer, there is something about being in community. And that is actually an interesting word, community. And so I come from Kenya. And in Kenya, I happen to speak 3 languages. So, well, 4 languages. English is one, as you can tell, obviously. Second one is Kiswahili. And so I do want to invoke those who speak Kiswahili and say, habari zenu leo. Okay, we have a few. Let's go a little deeper. How many can answer this question? Muriega. Same two people right here at the front. What are the chances? There's one more, Archbishop Moheria at the back. And I see another hand, but I can't tell who it is. Fantastic. Now, this is really, 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 really hard. Nango. We have some Luos in the house. Fantastic. Well, remember yesterday we talked about water and being water. Not water, water. Remember this? And there are three things we said we are going to do. We're going to flow, right? We're going to sit in heat and ask ourselves those difficult questions. And we're going to refract when we leave. How many people saw the art installation last night at the park after the rain? It was a perfect example of what refraction is. Bubbles floating in the air, beautiful light pinging it as it goes, and created this magical moment that was truly breathtaking. So those are the bookends of this conversation we're having over the next few days. Yesterday was flow, get to know your family, get to read the room, get into the energy of the room. Tomorrow is about refraction. How do we take this beauty that the messages that we hear, how do we take it into the world? But today is about sitting in that heat, sitting in that discomfort. And so if you're not ready to ask yourself difficult questions, as you're hearing the people on stage give answers to, then you're doing yourself an incredible disservice. So allow yourself to sit in those difficult questions. Now, we also said yesterday that I'm the serious guy, right? Serious guy wearing serious clothes today, as you can tell, other than my funky shoes, but that's okay. And so the next part of the discussion is about business. So much of our world is currently structured around an economic model that is purely extractive because it is in service of one thing: shareholder value maximization, which essentially means be as profitable as possible so that you can put money in your shareholders' pockets. But we have seen what that has done to the world. We have seen this incredible force of the markets and the invisible hand have led us to these divisions, to the challenges of climate change, to the destruction of our planet. And so can we imagine a new world? Can we imagine a world in which that economic model is actually harnessed and changed for good? And we have two amazing speakers. And so I'll invite the first one, J. Corn Gilbert, who in his previous life, I realized today, we worked at McKinsey. It's okay, you can come on stage. Let the people see you. We worked at McKinsey at some point, that's part of your bio. Jay then did one particularly cool thing, which for those who are sports enthusiasts, there's a brand called And One. Jay founded the company that built And One. Allen Iverson, there you go. For those who remember, for those of us who are a little bit older, we don't age ourselves. But then Jay then asked this question about business. What is business and what does it do? How can we make it a true force for good in the 21st century? And so launched B Lab and now is going to tell us about the amazing work he's doing in trying to build this community of business and business people asking that question and, more importantly, doing something different. So over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, well-beings. So I've got the pleasure, the privilege, and the peril of following this morning's opening because if you're a business person, you really want to follow the Dalai Lama, an imam, a rabbi, and a priest. And so it occurs to me that the most important question we could be asking ourselves is, what is a sacred economy? How would we create a sacred economy? How would we participate and support a sacred economy? And as most of you are probably guessing, the answer to that is with salad dressing. So my journey in helping to build a sacred economy begins with this bottle of salad dressing from a brand called Newman's Own. At the time, as Edwin mentioned, I was co-founder and running a company called And One, and we were in the middle of a rapid growth over a 5-year period to a $200 million plus global brand, competing with Nike and other large global companies. But in the middle of that journey, at our inflection point, at our height of our success, I ran into a firestorm. In September of 2011, 3 things happened in rapid succession. First, 9/11. Being born in New York and growing up in New York, I had many friends there, including in the building. My sister was rescued from first responders that day. Later that week, within 3 days, our father, for unrelated reasons, died of lung cancer. And just 2 weeks after that, a beloved colleague of mine from And One, Jean-Bernard Jout, died in a car accident on his way to work at And One. And so I was absolutely ripped apart. And all of the success that we had been having all of a sudden felt very insignificant. And I started to think about, hey, we're giving 5% of our profits to charity. We've got a great place to work. Pets and kids are in the office all the time. It feels like a wonderful place, but it doesn't feel like enough. And I started groping in a place of not knowing. I started groping for what could be a higher calling for business. And I found the salad dressing that had been in my cabinet for years. And 5% for charity is not as good as 100% for charity. What if there were a whole group of companies that gave 100% of their profits to charity? And I started talking about this community of Newman Ventures around the world. That would be this evergreen resource for charitable wealth, because that seemed like the highest expression of what you could do for business for good. But what happened in that period of not knowing is I had to slow down to start learning. And what I learned was that giving profits away is actually one of the least important things a business could do to create positive impact in the world. There were so many other things, so many other powers in business, in their products, in who they choose to serve, in what markets they choose to serve, in their practices and how they treat their suppliers, their environmental footprints, their worker practices, all of those things were way more important than what amount of profits they would give to charity. Out of that evolution from Newman Ventures to B corporations, we built a community of businesses that were not just giving profits to charity, but were generating those profits responsibly, that were using their business as a force for good, that were creating benefit not only for shareholders, but for all stakeholders. Over the last 15 years, this community of B corporations has grown. Now there are over 5,000 certified B corporations in over 150 industries in 80 countries around the world. All of them are redefining success in business so that their purpose is to create value for all, and they're measured, and their performance is measured by an independent third party to make sure that they're creating value and they're worthy of your trust. But we realized that going from building one company to building a community of companies was still not sufficient. And so the B Corp community started to partner with other communities of businesses around the world. Hundreds of other allies for economic systems change that realized that each one of those companies, while doing heroic work, were operating in a system with misaligned incentives and a culture with contrary norms. How do we shift the system to put wind at the backs of these entrepreneurs as opposed to in their face? And over a summer of co-creation, those 450 organizations came together to say, these are the imperatives for economic systems change. We have to design a new economic system for interdependence. We have to focus its energy on the highest purpose of investing for justice. And we implement that by making sure that that system is accountable to all stakeholders, not just shareholders, with our measurement systems, with our incentive programs, with our governance programs. We started working with artists, including artists that are here today, through the Amplifier Network, to translate that vision of an interdependent economy into what it would mean for real workers. What does it mean to move from thinking about a minimum wage to a living wage, from an economy that breeds financial insecurity to one that fosters financial security? How do we shift our mindsets from a winner-take-all mentality to one of creating shared prosperity? How do we use technology not to concentrate, but to distribute power? How do we change who is in power to change how power gets used? How might our boards and leadership be representative of the world that we live in, instead of everybody in leadership looking pretty much like me? All of this, we're at this great turning point in history. From a 20th century version of capitalism that is focused on maximizing shareholder value to a 21st century version of capitalism that is focused on maximizing value for all stakeholders. From one focused on creating short-term profits to creating long-term well-being on a healthy planet. Now, the challenge here is that the system was not designed for this. So all of those 5,000 B corporations, or the 200,000 companies that are using those same impact management standards to measure their progress along the way, is insufficient. We need to change the operating system of business, and we need to change the mindset of business leaders. This is what I would offer as the golden rule of business. And we need it to shift from being something that's just optional to something that is required. All businesses, not just B corporations, all businesses and all financial institutions. Because in capitalism, capital has the power. So we can't equip businesses to do one thing, but then have investors serving a different master. So all businesses and all financial institutions shall be responsible not only for their financial returns, those are important, but also for their impact on all stakeholders, and not only that, but on the natural and social systems on which healthy markets and all life depend. We need to upgrade the operating system of business to fix the source code error in capitalism, which is shareholder primacy. We need to upgrade the operating system of capitalism with this new model, which says that we are responsible for all. But a new operating system with operators with the same old mindsets won't work. They will lack the imagination, they will lack the creativity. And so in addition to the operating system, the technical solution, we need a heart-driven solution. And there are two things here. At an individual level, people like me in suits that are basically moving money all around the world to drive what gets invested, not that measure their success and their self-worth by their net worth. We need to help them, help me, shift our mindset to defining our value by our well-being and the well-being we create for others. And that involves this most important next step, which is to embrace a mindset of not knowing. That same kind of not knowing that I felt when I was broken open with those 3 events in September of 2001, or the same not knowing that happened for me when I was suffering from cancer and spending 6 months in chemo, thinking about what would happen if I was lucky enough to survive. What would I want to bring back? What would I want to work on if I was playing with the house's money? And what I realized, what I was at my most powerful when I embraced the discomfort of not knowing. The idea that I was totally open to the situation and to whatever the next move might be. And so as we sit here today in Basque country, in Spain, I bring you the words of a famous Spanish poet, Antonio Machado, and the backdrop of some of the mountains in Basque country. Caminante no hay camino, se hace el camino al andar hace el camino. Fellow travelers, there is no road, there is no path. The path, we make the path by walking. By walking, we make the path. Embrace that we don't know and make us open and let us walk humbly into an economy that is centered, a sacred economy that is centered on love, and extending that love to all of the people that we are in relationship with. Not all the people that we were doing transactions with, but all the people that we are in relationship with through business. And as we embrace that spirit of not knowing, let's remember to walk humbly, because we could be wrong. Thank you.
I see the challenge in the mind going. I see the noodling happening, which is fantastic. Our next speaker has, I think, one of the most brilliant introductions to her bio. If you don't have the app, I'll keep reminding you, if you don't have the app, download the app, log in, make sure that you get a sense of who are the people who are coming to us. And because we're short on time, we're not going to read the full bios. But this is how Kate's, who's coming on next, bio begins. Kate grows things, people, businesses, and movements. Right? Isn't that cool? People, businesses, and movements. And for each of these things to succeed, we only evolve at the speed of trust. For each of these things to succeed, we can only evolve at the speed of trust. Trust in yourself, trust in your abilities, trust in your colleagues, trust in your community, trust in the world. And that's part of the challenge that we all have, is how do we build more bridges to have that trust that allows us to take the leaps that we want to make. And so Kate, I'll ask you to come on, and actually, when she was in background kind of rehearsing her speak, I saw her do something which is cool, and I said we're going to incorporate this. So Kate, you're going to shimmy in as a shimmy out. She promised she would shimmy.
Reggie,
there
this
you go.
is for you, my shimmy sass. So, and if you don't think that took a lot of trust, I'm just telling you it did. It's so great to see everyone, and for a second, I just want to acknowledge the moment of true grace we started our day with, right? We saw multiple different religions come together in a true moment of harmony. And if that doesn't fuel well-being, I'm not quite sure what does. So I just want to say thank you again for the great start. So Jay talks about sacred economy, and I'm all for that. And the issue is that we're living in a trust crisis. And trust is the underpinning of everything. And trust is what's going to help us build that sacred economy. Now, I want to start with a story. It's 1979. It's a stormy day in El Ceibo, which is a small town in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. And we walk down, we collect our respective compatriots until we number 8. We are known as the El Ceibo Ocho. We are 8 teenage girls who are there to perform vaccines as part of Amigos de las Americas. We continue on and we go to the hospital. We pick up our little cooler that's got our vaccines of polio, diphtheria, and tetanus. We hop into the back of a beat-up 210 truck and head off into a jungle. We're dropped off one by one, accompanied by a male companion who we just met that morning. And then we're informed we're going to pick you up in 8 hours, 5 o'clock. Off we traipse up to go on these trails that we have yet to ever walk. We perform the vaccines to 6 to 7 different villages, and then we walk back down. And we find our way, I don't know how, and we continue back on to the hospital. Now, I start with that because think of the degree of trust along every single step of the way that took. Trust from behalf of the worker, the hospital, me, my parents, who I'm pretty sure weren't quite sure what I was going to be doing, but I'm so glad that I got to experience that because it instilled in me a deep sense of self-trust and trust in other, which has informed how I accept and I show up in the world. And isn't it weird that we have absolutely no qualms putting our lives into the hands of complete strangers when we hop into an Uber, a plane, a Lyft? And when we're welcoming to give our trust to people we've just met, I find it equally peculiar, we tend to distrust the people we know most, especially the environments we spend the majority of our lives in, our companies, our organizations. So we've now shifted from the sharing economy to the stalker economy, and now we're in an economy that's steeped in just deep, deep distrust. And that was just recently explained by a global workforce survey that Edelman shared, in which 50%, think about that, 50% of the people said there wasn't a soul in their companies that they trusted, nor would they ever imagine mentioning a problem for fear of retaliation. And of the remote workforce that answered, 75% felt that they were being monitored by their employers, and worse yet, that the contents of their computers were being rifled through. So how did we get there? Well, because in business, when we have a problem, we throw people, we throw money, and we throw technology. So social capital, financial capital, and then intellectual capital. And I would argue, all terrific forms. However, they're all rendered completely useless unless this one imperative form of capital that's so overlooked is not included, and that is trust. Because you can have all the procedures and the guidelines, protocols, think COVID, your own personal experience and facts, think climate change. Without trust, no move is made. Everything is taken at a standstill. For you see, I believe that we are all stewards, and I know everybody in here believes that we're all stewards of the planet, right? And what we do is we gather together. It's how we keep ourselves alive and the species alive, and we create these entities. They're called businesses and companies, and they have a soul, just as we have souls. And we create that sole purpose, which is to help create and answer problems large and small. Well, when we are lacking in that trust, none of this can take place, none of it whatsoever. And so whenever we say that business has to activate, which we've all been talking about, 3 fingers pointing back at us. We're the ones who activate that business, right? We're the leaders. We have to ignite the lifeblood of the company. That's what the workforce is really hungry for. That's what we want too, to know that we matter, what we're doing matters, what we're building together matters. So how do we do this? Well, I gotta tell you, how can we possibly expect anyone to trust us and follow us if we don't trust ourselves? And so I'm gonna bring out what I say I'm Betty Business and Jenny Juju, and I'm gonna bring out Jenny Juju right now. I'm going to tell you what we have to do is we have to go deep within, and we've got to ignite spirit, and we've got to bring the sole purpose of business activated. Because in so doing, we then will make sure that we follow through on what we say, and that is one way of creating trust. Now, curious, trustworthy leaders, are curious. They ask a lot of questions, and then they stick around, and they answer, and they listen respectfully, and they hear what's said as well as what's not said. Because they understand in building a trustworthy relationship, they're gonna get in that muck. It's gonna get ugly, it's gonna get uncomfortable. And they don't leave, they stay. They take a look at the world through what I call dragonfly eyes, meaning that they take into consideration the global workforce as well as the 5 different generations we're now working with under one roof. And in so doing, they're better able to make informed decisions and create a platform that's truly, truly steeped in trust. Because when I'm aligned in my truth and you're aligned in yours, there's no room for ego. That's the problem. Ego gets in the way all the time. And as such, then, we can move from me to we to us. Now, what I'm going to be doing is providing some examples, because I think a lot of times we talk lofty and up here, and I want to anchor it, because there are companies and people and leaders who are doing this, Lego being one. A few years ago, it was very beleaguered, and it took on a new CEO. There had been extraordinary distrust, and they had lost their purpose. They completely couldn't explain what their direction was, which is hard to believe, because Lego's pretty clear, right? I mean, it's a block, it's a toy, but as always, we try to make things more difficult than they are, right? It can be this simple, but we don't trust simple. But fortunately, the new CEO of Lego did. And he had a gut feeling that there was a nugget in the past that if he was able to bring it and tease it out to the future, he could help ignite the potential of what laid ahead. Secondly, he also recognized, wow, we've decimated our audience. And so as such, we no longer have a trusted group who believes in us. So he spent 2 years on a listening tour, rebuilding those relationships with internal and external stakeholders. And he came to recognize, yeah, I was right. It's all in the name, because Lego means play well. And isn't innovation just an overcomplicated adult term for play? It was created so that children of all ages could learn and grow by utilizing curiosity and logic, poet and quant ignited. And as such, he then recognized that there's a huge growth potential, and we can then expand out and create new product lines that'll grow along and age along with our audience, meaning there will always be a room, whatever your age, at the Lego table, And there's this amazing, deep-rooted community based in trust that is the Lego community. Now, to be that humble, you have to have extraordinary courage. You need to be really comfortable saying, I don't know, I need help, and then getting out of the way and actually accepting the help. Trustworthy leaders are very, very transparent, and as such, their workforce rewards it back to them. And they pay attention. They recognize that they need times to get refueled. And they also recognize that as a way to give others an opportunity for growth. Now, this is something that Warby Parker had put into play because they came to realize the necessity for autonomy. Because you see, autonomy, it presumes trust. Because in order to have trust, you have to give trust away. And this was something that they did from the get-go by actually putting the future of the company in the hands of the employees. And what they do is they go and they actually rebuild and they determine what the company is going to be working on through their process called Warble, and it's a crowdsourced effort. Now, the other thing they're doing is, by doing this, they're flattening the entire organization. They're making it more agile, more flexible, more responsive versus reactive. They're building out teams that are based on collaboration, cooperation, and frankly, interdepartmental. No more of those ivory towers that were based on karmic retributions. And with this autonomy, they are recognizing the individual genius of each of the employees. And the employees, in kind, respond by giving great new ideas over and over again. And they have to trust that the leaders are going to be okay with it if they make a mistake, that they're not going to lose their jobs. This is something Warby Parker has proven time and time again. So that leads me to all of us right now. Here we are, right? Do you trust yourselves? Do you actually know yourself, this person you call you? And I ask because I think we all so flippantly think, oh yeah, I know me, I got myself down. But do you really? When was the last time you asked yourself, what are my values? Because so often we get stuck in the ones that we very first started with. And it's important because leaders lead from where they are, not from an office, a title, a degree. Leaders lead from their hearts, from their souls, from their internal compasses. Leaders lead from who they are. And those who do succeed. And those who don't, in the long run, every time. So I would ask over these next few days, amongst this amazing city and these beautiful human beings and this art, that you take the time to actually ask yourself, do I trust myself? What are my values? What is my purpose? Am I actually doing it? And then, what actions could I take that could actually increase trust? Could I say, I don't know more? Could I ask for help more? Could I frankly just and let someone else fill the space? Because when you ignite your trust, you encourage others to do the same, because we're all mirrors for one another. And as for those values, we're going to need those, because values are going to be our true north compass points as we go through these very, very murky waters. We know that values get tested during times of adversity, but I also know that when you make a decision and you do the right thing, especially when it's hard, and it's based in those values, well, that's when trust is created. That's when belief is created. And that's when we can create this community and culture that once again will be trustworthy. So I would ask for you to take the time to set your path. Take the time to set it straight, because we really need you, all of us, to lead us into this next economy, the trust economy. Because without any internal change, no outer change is going to happen. And without collective change, no change matters. I thank you for entrusting me with your time.
Great. Good morning. Oh, come on. Come on. We can do more enthusiastically than that. So let's start again. Okay, let's pretend it didn't happen. I'll come back again. And then, remember, I mean, feel free to applaud as long as you're applauding yourself and everyone else here, not only the people on stage, okay? Okay, so let's start. We're starting again, okay? Yeah! Yeah! Yay! Wonderful! Woohoo! Woohoo! Yes! Well done, well-beings! Fabulous! Oh, yeah. Did you feel the change? Could you? I certainly did. So, thank you. Whoa, man, what a gift. And we had to move, right, to make these movements and everything. So, my greatest pleasure is to introduce now our next guest, because she is a dancer, she's a ballerina, but as she got more involved in the depth of her work and the questionings it brought, she studied psychology. And then she put the two realms together. Isn't that fascinating? To have the vision to bring two worlds that didn't seem to connect or like have much in common together, and today be here presenting the results of that choice in life to all of us. I mean, dancing is poetry in movement, and can we cultivate poetry in movement in our lives? I have no idea. My job here is not to answer questions, but to raise them. And therefore, I raised the question, and now I'll bring our guest who is going to help us find answers. And once we find them, please share, okay? So, with all the movement and energy of your arms and hands and bodies, I would ask you to welcome Dr. Nadine Caslo. Woohoo! Oh. Oh.
Well, thank you so very much, and it's wonderful to be here, and I just love that we're bringing together artists and scholars and community leaders. It's really quite a privilege to be here. We heard yesterday and again today that today is the day for some discomfort. And so I'm going to ask everyone to turn inward a little bit into that discomfort, thinking about your own intergenerational trauma that you are living with, because each of us is living with that. And while I'm going to talk about the work that I do today, recognizing in the past few months, having all of my grandparents be from the Ukraine, that the war there is part of my legacy of intergenerational trauma. And we each have that. And I'm going to ask you again to focus inward on your own stories, your own trauma, and sit with the discomfort of that, as hopefully we move from that through healing to flow. What do we mean by intergenerational trauma? Well, I think everybody here knows exactly what we mean. And it really has to do with when, as descendants of someone who experienced trauma before, we show some of the effects, the emotional effects, the behavioral effects, the interpersonal effects of what that person, our ancestor, or the communities we come from, experienced in terrifying, horrific situations. And just like those before us who were traumatized, we live with some of the legacy inside of us. That is intergenerational trauma. In the African American community, which is the community that I work with in Atlanta, Georgia, just a few blocks from the home of Reverend Martin Luther King, we know that for Black Americans, they were descended from enslaved people. And so the trauma that they live with is the trauma of slavery. And as structural racism persists and is really in full force right now in our country, it's not just the legacy or the history of that trauma, but how it gets perpetuated every day in small and large ways. And so the women that I work with have to cope with that intergenerational trauma as well as the ongoing trauma in their lives, the structural oppression and racism. Unfortunately, when that occurs, there's often a lot of difficulties that come with it. Think about your own trauma story. Think about your own intergenerational trauma. What kind of physical symptoms do you feel related to it? Do you have headaches? Do you have stomach aches? What kind of psychological problems do you bring to the table because of it? Has it affected your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself? We heard about helplessness yesterday and depression and post-traumatic stress. One of the very powerful presentations yesterday was a mother's story about the death of her son to suicide. All of the women in our project experienced racism and continue to. Intergenerational trauma related to family violence, related to child abuse, child neglect, witnessing domestic violence, and being in an abusive relationship. And those combined intergenerational traumas made them feel so badly about themselves, so helpless, so hopeless, that they felt like the only way out was to attempt suicide or die by suicide. That's how they get into our program. And it is taking many women from basically the bottom of their lives and trying to build a community and building a community to move forward. And we know when there's so much trauma, we just heard about how hard it is to trust when we have trauma, how hard it is really to trust ourselves, to trust other people. And that trust makes relationships difficult, and so we end up reenacting that intergenerational trauma in our current relationships so that it keeps getting passed down generation to generation. And it's imperative that we stop that cycle. And then along with that cycle, the internalized oppression and racism that the women I work with experience. And so in the early 90s, we started a project called the Nia Project. Nia is a Kwanzaa word that stands for purpose. And I think a critical part of well-being is to find a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives. We've worked with over 2,000 low-income African-American women, all of whom have a history of childhood maltreatment, domestic violence, and suicidal behavior, as well as the legacy of racism. People have talked here a lot about the different countries and cultures they come from, the different groups of people they work with at the individual level, at the community level. And we all know that the work we do must be culturally responsive, and that what works in one country or in one community is not going to be the same thing that works in another country or culture and community, and we're going to need to adapt it and do things from the ground up. And so the work that we do, really we strive to be sensitive to the historical effects of trauma, the family trauma, and the interpersonal traumas that have affected the lives of the women. We've heard so much today. We heard from our religious leaders today. We heard yesterday about belonging and how critical belonging is to our well-being. And so we've developed a group-based program because we think that working together as a group, as a community, builds a sense of belonging, and that is critical to the healing process. As was mentioned earlier, I was a professional ballet dancer. I still do my best to integrate the arts and psychology. Part of the group-based program that we do is an expressive arts program with art and theater and music and dance. And I must say I'm learning so much from the artists here about new things we can try and integrate into this program. In addition to that, we really believe that people sharing their narratives, their stories, is so important. So many people have lives of trauma that they weren't allowed to speak about. And so sharing our narratives, which people have been doing here, is key to the healing process. And we focus on making meaning. I've been really inspired by the little badges here that well-being inspires well-doing. And I think that what we try to do in our project is increase the well-being of the people that we work with, of the women in our program, through healing, and that in turn, they end up doing more well-doing. We think that empowering people, transforming their lives, helping them heal, enables them to do good. But it also means that in the process, we need to pay attention to our own well-being so that we can continue to do good. And so I'm talking about a program that focuses on individual well-being and community well-being in the face of intergenerational trauma. But we need to do such programs alongside of programs that build and strengthen family bonds and resilience. And as we've heard about so much here today, really promoting, and today, yesterday, throughout this time, promoting our communities to reduce violence in families, in couples, in communities, and the racism and oppression that people experience. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to see just a few words from one of the women in our program who, as she's gone through her own healing journey, has been doing good.
My great-great-grandfather purchased this property in 1882.
Donna Han McCoy's great-great-grandfather, Reuben Gay, had been raised a slave who used his freedom after the Civil War to prosper.
This is the second barn, and my dad helped build this barn. It was built in 1952.
Building this home in Fayette County and owning hundreds of acres of farmland. Generations of Gay's family, including Donna, now 60 years old, were raised here.
I just submitted to the Georgia State Preservation and the National Park, and this will be the first African-American historical landmark in Fayette County, Georgia.
And his descendants still inhabit these hundreds of acres, many buried in the same cemetery just up the road where he was laid to rest.
This is his grave here.
Donna's passion for her family's history is part of how she has helped to heal her traumatic past, one in which she was kidnapped and raped as an adult, one in which she grew up in an alcoholic home she fled at just 15 years old.
So I ended up being one of those women that was on the streets. I was standing on the street corner down by the Fox Theater, and that's where it all began for me, trying to survive on my own, looking for love, because it wasn't at home. I have a safety list.
Donna tried to take her life 3 times. It was one of those times hospitalized at Grady Hospital in downtown Atlanta that she learned of the Nia Project.
It gave me life, and I took that, and I kept coming and kept coming. In the midst of, there was things happening along the way, but I just kept coming. When I started having flashbacks.
And so I'm hoping that as you each now focus inside, again, you can think about how you can move beyond that discomfort based on your own history of interpersonal or intergenerational trauma through the process of healing and continuing to do good in the world. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's...
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, man, that was great. So, I have a fabulous guest to introduce to you now, and I have to share the story with you. Before introducing a guest, I always talk to this guest, and because I want to know how they like to be presented. So, I'll share with you the moment I met our next guest, and I asked, "How would you like to be introduced?" And the first thing she said to me was, "I'm a mother." And I said, "All right, cool. And I am a neuroscientist." But then she topped it by saying, "And my job is to promote the alchemy to access the art within." So, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot say anything else after this, except let's put our hands together to receive our next guest, Dr. Sarah King.
Hi, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. So happy and honored to be here with you all today in this gorgeous community. I want to start out with one of my favorite quotes that I've been using in every presentation that I've given in the past couple of years. It's by Dr. Bayo Akamalafe, and he likes to say, "Times are urgent, let us slow down." I'm going to say it one more time. Times are urgent. Let us slow down. And so that is the spirit with which I am coming onto the stage. That is the spirit that I'm hoping to engender in our bodies today. So all of the speakers at this summit have been so beautiful in their courage. These times call for outrageous courage. Am I right? Outrageous courage. To meet fully with the grief and the pain, the trauma, individual trauma, collective trauma, and the intergenerational trauma that you just heard Dr. Nadine speak about. These times also call for us to connect with that which is sacred. And so with that, I bring the following image onto the screen. And I'm going to step out of my comfort zone right now because given everything that is happening in the world, I think it is necessary for me to do some modeling. I'm going to do something that I've never done before. And I'm going to sing in public. I have never done this in my entire life, but that is what these times call for, right? Before I do that, I'm going to say that what I'm offering up in the space today, I would like to invite you to take less as a presentation and more as an experience. We're going to have a collective experience with one another. So with that, I'm going to offer up some instructions, and these are completely optional. Any instructions that I offer are completely optional. But if you would like to follow along, please place one hand on your heart. I can see you kind of getting comfortable in your seats. Yes, one hand on your heart and the other on your belly. And as you're doing that, perhaps you're starting to feel a little bit more connected to the seat that you are in. And maybe now, start to feel the bottoms of your feet and notice if the right foot or the left foot or whichever part of your body is meeting with the earth is lighter or heavier than the other. Is the right side of your body or the left side of your body lighter or heavier than the other? And together, I'd like to invite us into an act of collective solidarity, and let us take 3 deep breaths together. And as you are taking these deep breaths, you may actually notice that there is a shift, a subtle shift in the sound of the silence in this room, in the way that you are connecting your body to the earth. And I'm going to start with this. I'm going to sing this phrase to you, and I'd like you to sing it back to me. You are beautiful, you are magical, you are beautiful, that's what you are. Sing it to me. You are beautiful, you are magical, you are beautiful, that's what you are. And now, we are beautiful, we are beautiful, we are beautiful, that's what we are. I am beautiful, I am magical, I am beautiful, that's what I am. And now noticing the quality of the silence in the room has shifted once again. I want to call for a loving revolution at the level of perception. There is something amiss in the way that we are perceiving ourselves, the way that we view our internal world. Something is amiss, and I want to propose that something is amiss at the level of our relationship to color. Think about it. We actually choose to treat people differently on the basis of the way that we perceive their color. And color is something that we all have such an intimate and profound relationship with. So in this space today, I'm hoping to experiment with shifting that. And I want to ask this question. What is the power that art has to move and transform us from the inside out, to connect us to the sacred? And so in this moment, I'd like you to think of a person, an animal, an object, or a place that brings you in touch with whatever the sacred is. Call them into the room with you right now. And if you need to close your eyes, you can do that. A person, animal, object, or place which brings you in touch with the sacred. Can you imagine that they have joined with us in this room today? Can you imagine that you can project them into the space of the art that you see behind me? And even now, you may notice again the quality of the sound of the silence in the room has shifted again. And so, let's experiment. Let's play. The artwork that you see behind me is by a phenomenal artist named Wangechi Mutu. Some of you may be familiar. And when you're looking at this art, I want you to take a moment and notice if there are any particular feelings or sensations or emotions that are coming into your body. Where is the eye being drawn towards? Is there anything in particular that is coming up in your memory in this moment? Some form of self-recognition that is being inspired. And you may ask yourself, what is it that I can do on a moment-to-moment basis to change the world when the suffering that we are facing collectively is so enormous? So this is what I want to suggest. Oh, and it doesn't want to let me suggest. Hang on. These are some of the primary components of the practice of embodied awareness, some of the tools that you can use at any moment in time in order to transform everything about your relationship with yourself and the world around you. Each of us as humans has been gifted the power of awareness. If you are alive, then you are aware. In any given moment, you can bring the power of your attention, your breath, your ability to concentrate on what is happening right in front of you. You can shift your posture and your alignment in order to show that you are fully present and engaged with the people around you. You can become curious, truly curious about the people who you are seeing, the places that you are encountering. You can deliver compassion for yourself and for others, noticing and recognizing the quality of the emotions that we have with one another, noticing when you feel present or absent, noticing the gift of relationality, of intentionality. And so with that, I want to say a little bit of something about how I use this in my professional world. I debuted at the Museum of Modern Art an event called The Art and Science of Hope and Justice with my colleagues Dr. Dan Siegel and Orlando Villarraga. And this debuted around the time of the Trump election in the United States when there was so much violence and vitriol. And we decided that what was needed at that time was an experience of diving deep into the art inside of our hearts so that we could discover how it is that as scientists coming together with artists and musicians, we can really reveal the capacity that the mind and the brain has to actively generate hope and justice that live nowhere else other than inside of the body. My next event with the Museum of Modern Art was art and awareness as a catalyst for collective healing. And why is this important? Museums around the world are deciding that they have to become active in becoming spaces to heal and reveal trauma, to offer critical services of well-being to the world. And so for those of you who are patrons of museums or perhaps who belong to a museum, I want to call on us now to really think hard about how museums can become future sites of healthcare for our society. So I'm going to skip over that last slide because I want to move directly into this final experience. Please cue the music. If you'd like to close the eyes, I invite you to close your eyes. Or if you're more comfortable, you can anchor into the artwork that is behind me. This is a piece of art by the artist Betty Saar. You may even vacillate between slowly opening the eyes and closing the eyes just to notice the experience. And let's place one hand on the heart and the other on the belly. And notice what begins to shift in this space. If your eyes are closed, you may notice certain colors arising in your internal experience. If you choose to open your eyes, You may notice an immediate shift as soon as you connect with the art. What is coming alive for you in this moment? Is there some aspect of yourself which you have neglected, which you now remember in the presence of this art? Shifting now to this artwork by Sam Gilliam. As you notice the difference in the colors on this canvas, is there some shift that you notice inside of you? Let's all take 2 more deep breaths and experiment with allowing the muscles of the belly to soften and relax. What do you notice? As you notice your inhales and your exhales, what dream may be burgeoning inside of you? So I want to end this experience with a suggestion. And the suggestion is this. We are beings who live at the nexus of our ancestors' dreams and the memories of our descendants. I'm going to say it one more time. We are beings who live at the nexus of our ancestors' dreams and the memories of our descendants. And so the next time that you see a color that provokes some deep memory or emotion inside of you, maybe in that color there is a message from your ancestors. There is a message from all of those in this world who are to come after us. And I hope you take that message inside of your body and you use it to inspire a whole new movement of healing for yourself and for everyone else on this planet. Thank you so much, everyone, for your practice.
Hope. Oh, look at that. Isn't life wonderful? Thank you for your practice. How did you guess I was going to practice some? Oh, wow. We have our next guest. And before our next guest comes on, I would love to see if you practiced what we practiced yesterday. You know, this little finger torture I introduced to you. So if you remember, okay, when the thumb comes up, the pinky comes out, and then we just switch, right? This is just a memorization so that the next exercise I'll teach you, will have you ready and warmed up. So, 1, 2, 3, go. Yes. Exactly. How does it feel? Is it easier? Is it more difficult? Are you using your breath? Yes. And this afternoon, I'm going to teach you a really tricky one. Okay? So, but now, the next thing the brain loves, a round of applause for all of you and for our next guest. because it's so important that we keep the playfulness going. And to welcome our next guest, Hope Masaki.
How are you this morning? How are you this morning? We bring you the music of Zimbabwe. We hope this music, which we call Mbira music, soothes and heals your souls. We hope you are nourished thoroughly before you go for your tea break. Good music always heals.
Ndinongopotera nemasango she, ndinongotenderera nemasango naishewe, tarira indatsungaira
Hope! Something, whatever your heart wishes, yes.
Well, they took our instruments. I don't know where our instruments are. They took our instruments. Oh. This very lovely, fantabulous gentleman just kindly asked us to do another one. And because it's him, we're going to do another one.
Thank you so much.
Because playing mbira is a lot easier than this.
You do that with the notes and the voice, and that's beautiful, so.
The first song we played is called Wondo, and Wondo means war. It's a lament to the heavens or to whoever means the most to you, whoever your center is. Yeah, so as we look for solutions to how to live our lives the best, we also go back to our center and ask the questions and find solutions. This one is called Zvichapererini. Which is a question, it's asking when shall it end? A lot of things that we ask, we don't know when they will end. But to those things that we have power to change, it's our duty to change them. Those we can't, we have to accept. Yes, Zvichapererini. Zakatangariniko, zvinoperaniko. Zakatangariniko, zvinopedzwa naniko. Zakatangariniko, zvinoperaniko inde. Zakatangariniko, zvinopera seiko. Oyo yo yo yo. Mbirimidzi yedzaenda. Nyambira uya waenda, oi 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 oi, mbiri midzi yedzaenda, gwenyambira Sujapera, oyo, ona sujapera, 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 rinigo, sunopetswana nigo, oyo, ndire, ona sujapera, 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 nigo, sunopetswana nigo, Sujapera, 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 say, sunopetswa nani, sunopera nay, sunopera rin, sunopera say, sunopetswa nani, sunopera nay, sunopera rin, sunopera nay, sunopetswa nani, Thank you so much. Siyabonga.
Hope Mazeki, ladies and gentlemen, and Abram. Okay, Hope Mazeki and Abram. Thank you so much for your encore. Ha! Oh man, this is about taking risks. Yes, so now, okay, we had Hope back, and it was wonderful. Look at our energy, and I'm going to ask you, to beg you, this is the moment of the cooperation here. A 10-minute, no more than 10-minute break, so that we can enjoy 2 hours of lunch, okay? So we come back in 10 minutes. It is, what time is it now, please? What? 11:22. I'll see you back at 11:32. Okay? 11:32, and then we have the end of this session, and then we go to a 2-hour lunch break. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your line in the bathroom. Make friends. Tell jokes. Yes, exactly. Then you forget a little bit how much you need to use the bathroom, and you use that energy to connect to someone and bring a wonderful memory from the summit. Thank you so much. Enjoy your break, even if you are peeing. That's what I say. That is why I'm here. And I don't.
With the microphone? Okay. Okay. I need Wellington. Where is he? I want him to be with me. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I don't have sound. Everyone, come back, come here. It is so unfair because I depend on my co-host for entertainment, and I'm like left alone here to figure it out. Hello? Wellington, Edwin, come here, help me. I don't have a trick. Here, let me do Wellington. Do this. Have you figured this exercise here? No? All right. Well, let's give us a minute to all sit down. I visited the Rubin Museum exhibit yesterday, and I had a profound experience of an exercise where we had to match our breath with light going in and out. And everyone just had to sit down and match the breath with the light going in and out. And apparently, it was based on a neurological studies between mother and child, and that in that breath, when we all synchronize our breath, all of us in any one room, all our divisions and our separations and individuality gets dissolved, and we tap into the energy that we are all part of. So not only do I highly encourage you to go to that exhibit, but actually to also, how do we settle in here now? And we go back to our breath, in and out. And when we take that moment, we do tap into that energy of our own collective oneness and wellness. Now, one of the ways that I came to learn for wellness, well, in all of its diversity, that's what I like about the Wellness Summit, because it doesn't have one aspect of wellness, it has multiple faceted understanding of wellness, is that we have to generously listen to each other, to quote the Vuslat Foundation. And generously listening to each other, to ourselves, to nature, it's a different example than a different experience than just listening. Listening could be a linear way. Generously listening is a circular way, where we are hearing ourselves, our prejudice, our emotions as we are listening to the other. And once we catch ourselves in all our voices and we truly can engage with the other and listen to them, a new experience emerge with that. So explore the meaning of generous listening. There's a whole track about that. But I bring it up because we are about to engage with a completely different aspect of the summit. We've just engaged with music, with spirituality, with religion. Now we're going to engage with socially conscious AI. I am so curious to understand what does that mean and can that be? But I'm going to leave us in the good hands of professor and thinker Sine Gabraeb. So please help me welcome Professor Gabraeb.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk about humanizing technology, humanizing information technology, humanizing artificial intelligence technology, humanizing AI. Coming to Bilbao a few days ago, I had not in mind to have a speech here with this as a title. In fact, I prepared a different speech for you. A speech on the importance of developing AI technology, in the spirit of Paulo Freire, the influential Brazilian thinker, educator, change maker, community builder. But in the past few days, having had many conversations with some of you here, I realized one thing, and that's the question that I should address here today with you is not how we should develop AI, But should we develop AI at all? Should we use AI at all? So instead of giving a presentation to you that I prepared and planned, I take the moment here to reflect a bit with you on the conversations that I had in the past few days. What I would like you to do, let me start with the takeaways. Basically, the reflections, the takeaways from the conversations that I had with you in the past few days. The first one is that most of you realize, are aware of the fact that AI is permeating society. It is shaping our daily lives. It is bringing ease, much ease. Think about your phones, full of AI technology. The second point that I would like to communicate to you, reflection, is that many of you are concerned about the harms that AI can bring. Misinformation, bias, discrimination, hate, violence, and so on. The third point is that you, most of you, have serious doubts about whether we can humanize or socialize AI. So what I would like to do for a minute with you is to ask you questions. I would like you to reflect for a minute on two questions. The first question is the following. If AI is capable of adopting unwanted human behavior, have we not already then humanized AI a bit? Could you think about that? And could you please raise your hands if you think the answer to this question is yes? Thank you. The second question. If AI can adopt unwanted human behavior, can it not also adopt human virtues, values, dignity, compassion, love, well-being, equity? Who thinks the answer is yes? So, before going to my next slide, let me tell you a bit of the things that I have done in the past. So I've been working in the field of AI for the past 30 years. And more than a decade ago, I started to think and work on the potential harms of AI, in particular AI and bias. And when I attended people on these potential harms, there were a few that took me seriously. Nowadays, a lot of people are concerned with AI and bias on a daily basis. And what I see happening now is a similar development. I'm focusing much more in my current research and work on the potential positive aspects of AI, using AI for the social good, using AI to advance society in a more just and in a more inclusive manner. People question this. People question whether that's possible. So my answers to these two questions is, as you might guess, yes, we have humanized AI to some degree. In fact, it has taken a lot of our worst impulses over. And yes, AI can adopt human virtues, values, dignity. And my position is that it's our duty to develop AI, to use AI in order to promote and to propagate these values: compassion, love, well-being, equity. But we don't know how to do it. We just don't know how to do it. And that's, in a sense, because we have not learned that AI can be used as an enabler of good human values, virtues. The early adopters of AI, and especially big tech, in a way, have corrupted and hijacked our minds and hearts when it comes to technology. And I think we need to liberate ourselves. We need to develop a new perspective, a new paradigm when it comes to AI. And in order to do that, I think it's important that we embrace the unknown. That we embrace the unknown, but use principled choices in doing so, while doing so. And let me share with you 5 principles that I think are important in humanizing AI. The first principle, plan and purpose, is about the why of AI. Why do we develop AI? A lot of AI technologies are currently developed with the objective to maximize profit, to minimize effort. Human values, equity, compassion, well-being should be the explicit optimization goals of AI technologies and AI systems. We should develop AI with human virtues and values as the core element, and it can be done. Sometimes it's even a matter of adjusting a few formulas, a few codes, in order to optimize compassion. The second principle, people and perspectives, is about the who of AI. Who develops AI? Is there representation? Is there inclusivity? What we see often is a mismatch between those that develop AI and those upon whom AI is used. I think AI should be used always or developed always in teams of people with diverse backgrounds, professionally, personally. Interdisciplinarity and diversity are essential. The third principle, past and present, is about the what of AI. What data do we use to train, develop AI technologies? What you often see happening is that data in certain places of the world or from certain times, certain population groups are used to develop AI and then used on other population groups in other places. For example, mental health data from the global north used to develop AI systems to help people in the global south with mental health issues. I think this is a disaster. I think this is a recipe for disaster. Right? Locality and granularity are key. They matter. Locality and granularity of data matter. Principle 4, processes and procedures, is about how of the AI. How do we develop AI? Is there transparency? Is there accountability? And often that's not the case. Governments around the world, corporations around the world claim to be transparent, claim to be accountable, but they are not. Take as an example the Dutch child benefit scandal. The tax office in the Netherlands used an AI system to flag people that are accused of fraud. It used a system that falsely accused thousands and thousands of parents and caregivers of child benefit fraud, falsely. And most of these people were people from ethnic minority groups or low-income families. They've been discriminated and chased after for years by the Dutch government. This scandal brought down the Dutch government. But lessons have not been learned, despite the fact that people called for transparency, called for change. Little happened, despite the fact that the government failed on this issue. The last dimension that I think is important, is essential, is participation and praxis. This is about the whom of AI. Are those people for whom AI is developed, are they involved in the creation of AI? Are they involved in the process of creation of AI? They are the ones that experience it. So they are the ones who can correct the systems, who can clean the system, who can remove the biases, the hate, and so on. Outreach and co-creation are vital. I think that these 5 principles help me, and hopefully also others, to humanize AI technology, to humanize AI. And I see it happening many places. These principles taken seriously and efforts being made to realize them, but often in isolation. So some organizations focus on improving their processes. Some organizations focus on making sure that the data is representative and inclusive. Some work on the diversity of people that work on AI. I think in order to make sustainable change in thinking about AI and working with AI, these dimensions need to be taken all together. There needs to be a holistic approach to these dimensions. Let me end with an appeal. The AI community alone is not capable of humanizing AI. It's not capable of humanizing technology. It needs help. It needs help from critical thinkers. It needs help from other communities, communities such as you, communities that are involved and concerned about love, kindness, compassion, not getting enough attention. So I hope that you give AI a chance, and I ask you to help humanize AI. Thank you very much.
Wow, 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 thank you. I mean, I'm a Trekkie. It's a secret about me that you may not know. I love science fiction, and this just took me to a whole new world of understanding. Anyway, we continue this new exploration, but first I'm gonna play music for you. Not really. But what does a musician have to do with an engineer? I have no idea, but they birthed a child. And the child became a unique, amazing person who, what the LA Times called him America's most wired composer. And the New York Times called him a musical visionary. Please help me welcome Todd Makover, composer and professor at MIT Media Lab, to talk about engineering and music. Woo!
Thanks so much. It's so exciting to be here for so many reasons. I think like Senai said, I've been taking in so many amazing ideas and meeting so many people. I really don't want to talk about anything that I meant to talk about, but I will, because I didn't have time to think about something else. It is incredible to be here at this conference that combines so many different backgrounds and looks at the largest issues about wellness and social change and has the arts at the center. That means so much, and it's something that I care about a great deal. And as the introduction said, technology has also been at the center of this equation for me for a long time, partly because I had an engineer father and a pianist mother, and I've been trying to reconcile those, and especially to turn technology into something that helps us grow as individuals and societies rather than holds us back. So let's see, which slide is it? Yeah, so I think in the little time I have, I just want to add a few maybe unusual ideas about how music can be used to inspire creativity, to induce calm, and to build powerful communities. All things that we've talked about, but maybe there's a slightly different approach in what I'll say. So for a long time, I've been looking at ways that technology can adapt to the way humans behave in the most intimate way rather than the other way around. So this is a technology called hyperinstruments. That's a young Yo-Yo Ma playing a cello that we built for him. The cello measures not only how he plays, but his inner feeling while he's playing, and by changing just a little bit of his expression, the cello can turn into a trumpet or a flute or a voice or a whole orchestra or something you've never heard before. All very, very intuitive. And we can use that same technology that we built for a solo instrument to control a very large project. So I do operas and stage shows. This is one about a man who wants to live forever, and he actually finds a way to download himself into his environment. The singer leaves the stage right away. He says, "I'm out of here. I have another form of existence." And he actually goes down in the orchestra pit with the instrumentalists. And just like with Yo-Yo, we measure everything about him. We measure his singing, but also his gesture, his muscle tension, his breathing, his everything. And all of that gets reflected back onto the stage. So in fact, the whole stage, everything you hear, everything you see, actually is this person, even though the human being's not there. And so the whole opera is about, what is the limit of technology? Can technology actually allow us to live forever? Can it allow us to represent everything about ourselves, like over Zoom? I guess we know now that it can't, and that's where the opera ends up. But let me just play you a tiny bit of this, and then I'll show you where that technology can go next. First opera, I think, with a chorus of robots, but I recommend them for any other opera if you want to make one. All the characters in the show actually follow the main character into this system and say, oh, there is a better existence through technology. And the daughter's the one who finally says, it's not the same thing. I'm human, mortality, technology is not a replacement. So that's where the opera comes down. But you can use similar technology for all kinds of instances for health and well-being in particular. We can design an instrument like this for somebody like Dan Elsey, who was born with cerebral palsy, can't speak, has a very difficult time communicating, but he can use the head system that we built for him to create music with our software and also to perform it, and really to show who he is through his music and through this interface. We can use it to build a device called an orb that measures the vibration in your voice and allows you to meditate yourself by singing, and like a singing meditation, and to feel the physicality of your voice amplified, or to share it with family and friends so you can share this physicality of your voice. It's a new way of understanding your own singing. And at the MIT Media Lab, we study a great deal about why music affects us so deeply so that we can shape music for particular purposes, almost like a prescription to make music that has particular effects on people. Alexandra Riguer and Kimi Lakamwazam are both have backgrounds in music and neuroscience. Kimi happens to be here, so if you see her or if you come to our workshop this afternoon or the vernissage later, she's a fantastic person to talk to about music and mental health in particular. One thing we've been studying is forms of frequencies that actually have very, very specific effects on your physical and mental state. So Alexandra's been studying gamma frequencies, which are 40 hertz. It's actually the lowest. I can play it for you. It's about the lowest E on the piano, lowest E on the electric bass. And it turns out that that's a frequency that we have running in our brain but it often goes wrong. It's either not there, it's the wrong frequency, it's intermittent. And when it goes wrong, a lot of things, bad things can happen. One of the main ones is that the parts of your brain that clean up after brain activity, called microglial cells, stop working, and plaque builds up in your brain, which is one of the things that causes Alzheimer's disease. So if we can get these frequencies running again, it actually reverses the effect of Alzheimer's disease. So it's the only thing that does that yet. So it's a musical input that can actually change Alzheimer's disease. And this is actually what the frequency sounds like. It's not just the low note, but it's all the partials over it. And I actually like that sound, but most people don't want to listen to it for hours and hours. So we've been embedding that sound into musical pieces that are interesting to listen to. So this is just a little bit of a piece that I wrote for the Kronos Quartet called Gamified, with that frequency the entire way through, but with a musical narrative that carries you along. So this is 30 seconds of Gamified. So hopefully that refreshed your brain just a little bit. So just one last thing in this little bit of time that I wanted to share with you. That's actually my mom, and I think I'm in that picture somewhere hidden in the back. And so she was a very well-known music teacher, went to Juilliard, terrific pianist, but she really believed that it was just as important for kids to learn to make their own music, to be creators, as it was to learn music on printed pages written by people who died a long time ago. And so I was the oldest of 3 kids, so I was kind of her guinea pig in learning her methodology. And we'd have our piano lessons, and then she'd say, okay, could you just stay for 5 more minutes and go anywhere in the house and everybody bring back something that makes an interesting sound. So we'd all go bring a pot or a pan or a book or a lamp or something from around the house. And she'd say, okay, what sound does that make? And that. And oh, that's great. What's the loudest sound you can make with that? What's the softest sound? What's it like with those 2 sounds together? Oh, how interesting. What's a word that describes that sound? Oh, we have a lot of sounds, a lot of words. Can we make a story with them? How would we start? What comes next? How do we end? Fantastic. Now, when you go home this week, could you just make a picture of what we did so that when we come back next week, you can remember it and we can do it again? And so in that little bit of time, we learned that music isn't something just on printed music. It's something that comes from the world around us. It's something that anybody can not only make their own music, but make their own system. And even something complex like music notation is just a way of remembering something you did so that you can do it again. And I think that not only influenced me a great deal, but it led to what I spend a lot of my time doing now, which is trying to encourage everybody, no matter what their background, age, musical training or not, to develop their music creativity through music. And the largest project that we do in this area is called City Symphonies, where we go into a city, we say we're going to make a sonic portrait of the city using musical elements like an orchestra or a band or whatever, all kinds of instruments, but also by listening to the city itself, find out what those sounds are. And then we invite everybody in the city to collaborate to make that piece together. And these turn out to be fantastic projects. We've done them all over the world. We start by making apps so that people can go and record sounds. We have software called Hyperscore, where anybody can compose using lines and color. And we have an installation of that right now if you want to try it over at the Ascuna Zentoya. We collect thousands of sounds and put them in sonic maps where you can make your own mixes by moving your hands and trade them with everybody else in the city. We do all kinds of workshops, improvisation and collaborative. We collect all these sounds. And actually, we're just going to play 1 minute of how we make this project. This one's from Detroit.
I think what Todd's doing with this program, the sounds that we're going to gather and the voices that we're going to hear are new, they're fresh, they're vibrant, and they're full of hope and optimism, which is something that you don't normally see when you talk about Detroit.
I love how he's incorporating like all the sounds of the city, and he's giving people who've lived in Detroit and know the city the best the opportunity to share with the rest of the world what they love about the city themselves.
Detroit is full of people who know how to go out there and get things done, who know how to make a way out of no way.
We're going to make a big piece of music for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. We're going to show the world what Detroit sounds like.
And to close, I'll just say that we're talking about the idea of perhaps doing one of these city symphonies here in Bilbao on the theme of what would it be like to have an entire community devoted to well-being for everybody. The idea would be to do this over the next 2 years, and we started now. If we do it, we'd certainly love all of you to consider yourselves honorary citizens of Bilbao and contribute. And I'll just end by, we've been working with kids here for the last month or so. Just wanted to play one tiny snippet. This is a little piece by Javier, sung through the eyelids. This is just a tiny bit that we took, and I gave it to my students back at MIT. So this is the original in hyperscore. And I gave this to Anna and Max just a few days ago, and they morphed it into this, which is the first kernel of this Bilbao Symphony. So help us make a Bilbao Symphony. I'd love to talk about it with you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Is it going to stay there? You gotta come back. You gotta come back. Some people are standing and.
Oh. Thank you. I'm surprised. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Play?
Thank you. I was tempted to just steal the applause for myself. I thought you guys were so excited to see me again. Then I figured, maybe it's not about me. Oh, there you go. Okay. Not too bad, not too shabby. I recognize most of you have had what we in the business of hosting events is called a one drink break. A one fluid break. So either you drank something or something came out. And so that is usually a weird place to be because then you know lunch is coming. And so if you did not have coffee, then your energy is kind of low. If you had coffee, then maybe you're a little bit pressed and you want to get to the action of actually getting to lunch and a longer break. So I'm going to keep my introductions very, very brief. It is not often that you get to meet somebody who wrote a seminal document that you read in college. So in undergrad, I was a biology major, and one of the classes I took was neuroscience. And there's this incredible article written about the neuroplasticity of the brain, right? Like that your brain is constantly evolving and making new connections. And I read this paper, and it also made the argument that compassion and happiness are skills you can actually learn. You can train your brain to just be happy and to be compassionate. And so it's without further ado, I welcome Richie Richardson, who's a professor of psychology and psychiatry at UW Davis, to tell us where do we go from here? What's next?
Thank you.
Yeah?
Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you all. I began my career with a simple question. Why is it that some people are more vulnerable to life's slings and arrows than others? And I studied the brain mechanisms in the early part of my career. I studied the brain mechanisms of why some people are more vulnerable to adversity, to depression, to fear, to stress. And then my life changed very dramatically in 1992. And what happened in 1992 is that I first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And this is a picture of the Dalai Lama in our laboratory. And if we can get the slides on this monitor so I can see them too, that would be great. I first met the Dalai Lama in 1992, and he asked me a simple question at that time. He said, why can't we use the same tools of modern neuroscience that we had been using to study stress and anxiety and adversity and study kindness and study compassion? And I didn't have a very good answer for His Holiness on that day, other than that it's hard. But you know, when we first began to study fear and anxiety, that was hard too, and I think most scientists would agree we've made a little bit of progress. And that was a really important wake-up call for me. And then a few years later, when I saw him again, he was more direct, and he said, please take the practices from my tradition, turn them into a form that anybody would feel comfortable practicing, investigate them with the tools of modern science, and if you find them to be valuable, disseminate them widely. That is my assignment for the remainder of my time on this planet, and it is why I'm here. There is an urgent need today. The crisis of well-being and its devastating and interdependent consequences is not something I need to review for this audience. But well-being really matters, and our well-being is in rapid decline. These are data, just one of many, many points of data that I can refer to illustrate how well-being matters. These are data from 151 countries looking at the relationship between well-being in that country and life expectancy. And you can see that there's a very tight correlation, so that those countries that enjoy higher levels of well-being have higher life expectancy. Well-being gets under the skin and has dramatic consequences for our health and many other aspects of our lives. Now, I want to start with the World Health Organization's definition of health, a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. In the United States, we have this entity called the National Institutes of Health, which is a great entity. It's the world's largest funder of biomedical research in the world, but it's misnamed. It's not the National Institutes of Health. It's the National Institutes of Illness. We need a renewed emphasis on health. Health is not simply the absence of illness. And mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. These are definitions from the World Health Organization. Now, there's a lot of challenge today. The news in the world is terrible in so many different areas, from climate change to systemic racism and more. It's important to recognize, though, when Martin Luther King gave his famous speech in the 1960s, the title was not, "I Have a Nightmare." We need to envision the possibility of living in a different way. And the imagination is going to be a key driver and guide us in how to live differently. We've come to this very simple conclusion, but one that we think is quite radical, and that is that well-being is a skill that can be learned. We, humans, are born to flourish. We have the innate capacity to flourish. Not only do we have the capacity, but every human being has the right to flourish. And what science teaches us is that the very same mechanisms that encode suffering, including neuroplasticity and epigenetics, are the mechanisms that can be harnessed for the good and that can be used to produce awakening and liberation. These same basic mechanisms. And this is what the science is teaching us. So what contributes to resilience and flourishing? We have developed a framework for understanding the key pillars of well-being. We've asked in this wonderful meeting, what is well-being? Well, I will offer one template for its understanding. So this is a framework that we published a couple of years ago in an article that we titled The Plasticity of Well-Being. And that is meant to emphasize the constituents of well-being that science shows us can actually be transformed. So what are the four key pillars of well-being? The first pillar we call awareness. And awareness is our capacity to deploy our attention, a capacity that every human being has to some or more extent. It includes our capacity to know what our minds are doing. This is a capacity that we scientists call meta-awareness. How many of you know what your minds are doing right now? That's pretty good. How many of you have ever had the experience of reading a book where you read each word on a page? And you might read one page, you might read a second page, and after a few minutes you have no friggin' idea what you've just read. Your mind is lost. The moment you recognize that is a moment of meta-awareness. It turns out that meta-awareness is absolutely essential for all other forms of human transformation. And it can be learned. The second pillar of well-being is connection. It's about feeling connected, and it includes the qualities which are critical for healthy social relationships. Qualities like appreciation and kindness and gratitude. The third pillar of well-being we call insight. Insight is about getting curious about how our minds work, and particularly self-knowledge, literally knowledge of the self. We all carry around a narrative about ourselves. This is what humans do. We create these narratives. And one of the essential elements of well-being is not so much changing this narrative, but it's changing our relationship to this narrative so that we can understand that when we see the world, literally, our perception is defined and constrained by this narrative. And when we have insight into that, it can liberate us from the shackles that are imposed by such a narrative. And finally, the last pillar of well-being is purpose. And purpose here is finding our sense of direction, clarifying our values. And it's not so much finding something more purposeful to do with our lives, but rather how can we find meaning and purpose in that which we already do, including the activities of daily life that we might think of as pedestrian. Can taking out the garbage be centrally connected to your sense of purpose? Can washing the dishes be centrally connected to your sense of purpose? Can everything be connected to your sense of purpose? Absolutely. No doubt about it. But for many of us, it requires training. So I'm going to now take a deeper dive into a few of these pillars. And I'll start with awareness. This is William James that I just showed you. In 1890, he wrote this 2-volume tome, The Principles of Psychology. I was a student, a graduate student at Harvard working in William James Hall. Remarkably, I wasn't assigned a single page of William James as a graduate student. Fortunately, I found The Principles of Psychology. This is what he said in his chapter on attention. The faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. No one is compos sui if he have it not. And education, which should improve this faculty, would be the education par excellence. But it is easier to define this ideal than to give practical directions for bringing it about. If William James had more contact with the contemplative traditions, he would have instantaneously seen that if there's one thing these traditions do is that they educate attention. This is just a photograph taken in our lab of a very famous young Tibetan Lama, Mingyur Rinpoche, who at the time we tested him, based on a very careful, structured interview that we did with him, had 62,000 hours of formal meditation practice. You can go do the arithmetic at home, but trust me, 62,000 hours is a big number. And we measured his brain, because if we didn't see differences in his brain, we weren't going to see differences in mere beginners. And sure enough, his brain was dramatically different. These are gamma oscillations that we see with the naked eye, which we almost never are able to see, that are present not only during meditation, but also they are present in much greater density during the normal waking state, and they have something to do with this widened aperture of awareness that these practitioners reportedly have. And one thing to know about aperture of awareness is fear contracts the aperture of awareness, and love expands the aperture of awareness. Connection. Just very briefly, it doesn't take much. We did a randomized controlled trial, the kind of gold standard of modern rigorous scientific research, to test whether short-term compassion training, where a person brings into their mind another individual and wishes that they be free of suffering and that they be happy. And it's a very simple practice. I know many of you in the audience have done and do that practice. And we did this for 2 weeks, 30 minutes a day, a total of 7 hours of practice among ranked beginners. And we see that those who are assigned to the compassion group show more pro-social behavior
And I don't have time to go into how we measure that, but this is using rigorous behavioral measures, and their brains completely change in 2 weeks. These are beginners. 7 hours of practice, all it takes. Now, it's not to say that these changes will stick. If you go to the gym and work out for 2 weeks and then stop exercising, will the benefits stick? Of course not. These are meant to be lifelong practices. Insight, this curiosity-driven exploration of the self, is really a key to resilience. And one of the things that we have found is that people vary in how fast they recover from adversity. So let's take two people. This is person A and person B. They both reach the same amplitude. And it could be on any measure. We've done this with many different measures. It could be a stress hormone. It could be measures in circuitry in the brain. But they recover at different rates. The faster recovery is a marker of resilience. And this is something that could be taught. And finally, purpose, it turns out, is the most important psychological predictor of longevity of any psychological characteristic that's been studied. And these are some data that show that. So we've been interested in how to scale well-being. We've developed the Healthy Minds program, which is based on these 4 pillars of well-being. We've put it into an app which is freely available, completely free. And we're very happy that the New York Times, in a New York Times Wirecutter, in a review that they did of meditation apps for 2022, they named this one as being in the top 3 and the only one that's completely free. So please try it. These are just some screenshots. We've done randomized controlled trials showing that this actually works. So let me just end by saying the cultivation of well-being is an urgent public health need. When human beings first evolved, none of us were brushing our teeth. I'm sure every one of you in this audience spends a few minutes every day brushing your teeth. If we spent even as short a time as we do brushing our teeth, nourishing our mind, this world would be a different place. Thank you. Let me just end by reading this one quote from the Dalai Lama. This was from a book that was on the bestseller list. The systematic training of the mind, the cultivation of happiness, the genuine inner transformation by deliberately selecting and focusing on positive mental states and challenging negative mental states is possible because of the very structure and function of the brain. But the wiring in our brains is not static, not irrevocably fixed. Our brains are also adaptable. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Boom, man. Ah. So clearly, in addition to me geeking out and reading all those scientific papers, I'm sure anybody who's a parent here has had this conversation with their child and said, which I have with my 14-year-old daughter, I'm like, happiness is a choice. And so now we know it's really a choice. And now she's going to read scientific papers to prove that that is true, and therefore, Daddy knows everything. Next on stage is Eva Lee, who is a visual artist and an experimental filmmaker. Eva describes herself as a citizen of the world, but after literally spending 2 minutes with her, it's clear her roots are still in New York City. So Eva, please, welcome on stage.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I really want to just say my heart feels burst open by this summit. Is anybody out there feeling that too? I'd like to say thank you to the Wellbeing Summit organizers and supporters and creators, really, truly. for this opportunity to collaborate and to work together with Dr. Richard Davidson. It's just, I very much look forward to being here. Truly, this momentum that I am feeling, that we are all going to delve into ourselves and what all this means and get out in the world and enact it. So what I would like to do is, I have created experimental films in collaboration with Dr. Davidson. So I'm about to show you 4 trailers. They are 4 experimental shorts that were created especially for this neuroscience and well-being project, an immersive workshop, which will happen later. So why don't we just run the trailer, and then I will speak afterwards. So that was a sneak peek. My work has for years really been inspired by asking myself the question, what is the nature of mind and reality? And I am quite amazed that others here have shared personal experiences that led them to certain awakenings and understanding. For me, it was the passage of my father when I was 24, and it blew me away. I had no idea how I would relate to my father and what was this thing called mortality. And as I researched into it, because I tend to be academic, I started reading and learning more about mind and how we understand phenomena all around us, including birth, living, and death. So I have learned through the years that developing awareness of our own minds, while we experience life as a flow of changing circumstances and changing moments, is a core foundation of inner balance and well-being. And so my current work really is essentially my exploring this. It is non-narrative, experimental films. I aim to explore concepts of self in a captivating way, hopefully, and silhouettes is often the way that, the form that I use to explore. And I hope to point viewers towards experiencing themselves in the world differently, and to recognize that one's sense of self, your sense of self, is actually far more expansive than it appears. This is what I think anyway, as an artist. So I do hope that you will come join us later. What I do is really, I think of it as recreating reality. I'm representing phenomena. And hopefully it is to stimulate your perception that it's not reality, but it is an expression of reality. So I do hope that you will join Dr. Richard Davidson and me later for this afternoon's workshop. Those experimental films will be fully screened during an immersive inquiry into the nature of mind. Dr. Davidson is going to guide you through practices of an inner direct experience, of direct observations based on his innovative work and research on the brain bases of emotions. And together with experiencing the films, we hope to create a visceral, transporting experience for you today in the creative, interactive self-discovery. And it will be held in Lantegia 1, which is at Azcuna Zentroa. It will be in a spacious open venue where you can move, allow for collective movement and interaction. I highly encourage you to come and experience with us, and as the titles of the film may suggest, that you may search for who are you? Who am I? What is your essence in, your essence out? As you ponder neuroreflections in seeking the nature of mind. And the workshops, we will be going through the 4 pillars of well-being, as Dr. Davidson so emphatically and energetically described. I thank you. Please come join us.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. And I invite you to witness and enjoy our next guest. He's a speaker, he's a musical artist, he's a transformational speaker, he's an author, and in talking to him just before coming on stage, he was telling me about his work with high school students to come together across divide. So all your applause and attention and affection to welcome Justin Michael Williams.
Hey everybody, hello! Thank you.
Thank you,
You're just wonderful,
Justin.
thank you. How y'all feeling? Are we doing okay? Cool, awesome. So I'm so grateful to be with you all this afternoon. And I am here to talk to you about the end of racism. The end of racism. And I don't mean fighting about it. I don't mean learning about it. I don't mean studying it. I don't mean researching it. I don't mean making it better. I mean ending this shit. Ending it once and for all. And you know, I'm curious, how many of you after the events of 2020, particularly I'm talking about George Floyd, and it's not just George Floyd, I live in the United States, I'm in California, but all over the world we saw protests for social injustices that were happening around the world. And how many of you started to engage more deeply in your learning and education and understanding about social injustice and racism in the world? Raise your hand if you were a part of that group. Yes, great. Me too. Amazing, amazing that, you know, the world really started to wake up to this in a much deeper way. And what was happening is I too, even though I've been doing this work for many years, we had all these brand new books and online courses and podcasts and New York Times best-selling books and all these things to read. And I started doing the reading as well. And as I was reading everything, I thought, this is all so amazing. But why on earth does every book that I read, everything that I listen to come from this foundational assumption that says, this shit's probably never gonna end. We're gonna have to be lifelong anti-racist. I don't know about y'all, but I don't wanna be fighting this for the rest of my life, do you? So, I mean, generation after generation is gonna keep having to do the work, and for the rest of our lives, we're gonna have to keep doing the work, and we're gonna pass it on, we're gonna keep doing the work. And I just asked the question, just a question that I had never even thought to ask, was, could it end? Could racism end? You know, and there is a really important conversation to have here that we're having today, which is about the difference between change and transformation. So things change all the time, and we focus on change a lot. But when something changes, you can usually change it back. Change it again. We have a lot of change, political parties, who's in charge, whatever. And what ends up happening is we end up oppressing just a slightly different group, just looking a little bit differently. With transformation, the difference between change and transformation is when something transforms, what was is no longer available in the same way. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. The butterfly cannot get on the edge of the twig and say, you know what? I'm a little afraid of this flying thing, let me go back, right? Or I don't like the color of my wings, let me go back. You know, we can't do that. And so what we're really looking to do is have a transformation of consciousness, a transformation of what human beings believe is possible. And what I know to be true from all of my research, I've been studying the science of transformation for over a decade now. I know I look young, but the black don't crack, you know, so I'm a little older than I look, you know. And so for over a decade, and the thing that I want to share is that what we know is that every era of humanity is given problems or questions that, if solved, change the course of history, change the way humans coordinate forever forward on the planet. And this sounds very esoteric, but we're living in the manifestation of many of those things now. So for example, when humans learned how to create fire, when we learned how to travel by boat or by car, by plane, when we created the internet. And we're even exploring very widely one of these kind of questions, problems of our times, which is, can humans continue to multiply at this rate and coexist with the earth? Another one that we're exploring that we've seen change dramatically in our lifetimes is, can humans become an interplanetary species? Right, so this is something for most of us when we were younger was like science fiction, and now, just by show of hands, how many of you think we probably will live on another planet at some point? Raise your hand. All right, so you see, so this went from something that was like, yeah, right, sci-fi, to, okay, this is probably possible. So I started asking, why is racism this thing that we love researching, we love learning about, we love studying, or maybe not love, but we do a lot of it, but that a lot of people are not asking this question of, can it end? You know, can it end? And so this question brought me back to think about my own family. And so here's little Justin. I don't know if you can see me. Can you see my slides? I looked like I even had the microphone and everything today. And I grew up in a home with a black father, African American, and a white mother. My mom is Persian and Middle Eastern and Italian. And when my white mom decided that she was going to marry my black father, my grandparents on my mom's side, this is my mom's family, decided that they were going to disown my mom. Because even though they would have not considered themselves racist, even though Italians were not even considered white at the time, even though they had black friends and family and people that they worked with and enjoyed and communicated with, their daughter marrying a Negro, as they would say at that time, was not going to be okay. And this is really hard, for our family. And they thought that it was going to talk my mom out of it. And so my mom ended up getting married. Here's my mom walking down the aisle with my dad's grandpa walking her down the aisle. Nobody in my mom's family went to her wedding. No one. But I tell you this story to tell you about the miracle that happened next. My grandfather went back to this family and said, okay, look, y'all, it didn't work. We thought we were going to call it off. We had no idea that she was going to really stick through this. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to welcome her back, and we got to figure this out. And you have to imagine, this is after arguing. Imagine my dad's family knowing that the woman that he's marrying, his family doesn't like you because you're black, and my grandpa's now, we have to figure this out. And so the family came back together. And this is the family that I grew up with. And so thank you. And I'm showing this to illustrate a point. And one of my favorite pictures here is, so my dad on that side, my dad dancing with my grandmother at the ceremony they had for my parents much later. And just you can see my cousins and the mix that we had in our family. And I don't share this with you to kind of be like, and it was happily ever after, abracadabra, everything was fixed. It's not what it was. Absolutely not what it was. I share this with you because the way that our family was able to come together, and I have to tell you, our family came together in a way that I thought, honestly, until I left for college, I thought racism was a thing of the past. I thought it was completely over. I thought most people in the world were operating like our family was operating. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. My father was a police officer, so I didn't really have all these issues with police, and I thought it was over. And then surprise to me when I go out into the world what was actually going on. But what I learned in this family was something that I can never forget, and now I've dedicated my life to traveling around the world and teaching and speaking and writing about this topic and studying this topic of what causes people to transform. And I want to bring a few things to you today. So the first thing, the way that our family came together was first, everyone knew the truth of what happened. I knew about the story of what happened when I was a little kid. Nobody was too young or too old or too whatever to know the kind of story where our family started off. And the second thing is the most important thing that I want to share with you right now. And that is that our family had made a commitment that no matter if somebody said the wrong thing, if racist things came up, if somebody didn't know how to have a conversation, if there were arguments, that we knew that we were all committed to moving in the same direction. This is the difference between being anti-something, between fighting something, and fighting for something. Moving toward something. Oh, thank you. And so, this work that I learned with my family in terms of being able to walk towards something and move towards something, I watched how this helped us come together across what seemed like it would be just an uncrossable divide. And so I want to, share with you all that the reason I'm up here today, and we're going to be exploring this much deeper in my immersion session that we're having this afternoon. I still think we have some space if some of you want to come. Is I'm actually writing my next book with a woman named Shelly Tegelski. So many of you may know her because she's involved with the Wellbeing Project. Yeah, Shelly's amazing. And so I'm a black, queer millennial. She's a white Gen X Jewish mom, okay? And we're coming together to write a book to show that we all have work to do to end racism. All of us, not just white people, definitely not just people of color, not just black people. We all have to come together because the truth of the matter is we keep talking about being on this bridge. We have to create a bridge to equality. We're on the bridge. We're standing on the bridge and we're so busy arguing over whose suffering matters more. instead of walking across the bridge, moving toward something we love. So I want to leave you with one big teaching that is one of my favorite teachings to give, especially as it comes to these concepts around things that are considered impossible. And what you have to remember is all great changes that have happened in humanity were once things that most people thought were impossible. Everything. And so with this concept of, again, not just talking about racism, but ending racism, what I need y'all to know, I need everybody to say this with me right now. Everybody say fear and faith. Fear and faith. One more time, fear and faith. Fear and faith. Thank you, amen. So fear and faith, we've had a lot of conversation about these things today, are the exact same thing. Sounds like a good Instagram meme, but I mean it, because every version of fear and faith require you to believe in something you can't see and that hasn't happened yet. That's it. Put every religion through it, put every version of faith through it, put every version of your fears through it. It's requiring you to believe in something you can't see and that hasn't happened yet. And we're gonna believe in something either way. But who we become on the other side of believing in fear is very different than who we become on the other side of believing in faith. Believing in faith is believing that our circumstances do not limit what's possible for our lives, what's possible for humanity. And this is not just optimistic or hopeful, because we cannot tie change to hope, because hope comes and goes. This is not just hopeful, this is strategic. Because every change that has happened in humanity has happened because some crazy people chose to believe in faith, chose to look around them and say, even though these are my circumstances, I believe that more is possible. What would make enslaved Africans look around them and say, one day we could be free? Look at the women's rights movement, even though we have a long way to go. Look at the LGBTQIA+ movement, even though we have a long way to go. For those of us in this room, the life we are living now, like Dr. Sarah King so beautifully said, these are our ancestors' dreams. So let us come together and dream a bigger fucking dream. Let's dream a dream. Let's dream a dream that we can only dream because of the dreams that our ancestors have dared to dream. Let us dream and then take action to end racism in this generation. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Encore, please.
Oh.
You got a standing ovation. Yes.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
Oh, it seemed you enjoyed. Or did you love it? Wonderful, yes. Thank you so much. Guys, when something like this happens, it changes the entire atmosphere and prepares us for next. It is my honor to introduce you to the presentation that is going to close this session, okay? First of all, one of our guests here has just performed at Carnegie Hall. And he is a talented singer, and he will be joined by the undescribable lady. This is this is what I heard about her, and I made a point of writing here. She is Bishop Chantel Wright, and we'll have the honor of receiving Kenyatta Emmanuel, the very talented singer, and the choir, Songs of Solomon, who changes the lives of young kids. And the question is that we just were faced with, could racism end? With change and transformation, the difference between change and transformation, could we transform? So while we think about it, the art of Kenyatta Emmanuel, Bishop Chantel Wright, and the Songs of Solomon. Please welcome them.
Good afternoon, all. I would like to encourage you to consider that hope really is nothing more than an expectation of a better future. That what is need not be what will be, that what will be will bring fullness, will bring joy, and we expect it. Hope does not disappoint. I guess I'm waiting for a miracle. Yes, I'm praying that I hear from a God I have to believe made us to be better than we've been behaving lately. I'm just reaching for a blessing, requesting a little help and answers to questions that maybe we should be asking ourselves, like, can't we agree there's something wrong if I feel the need to scream my life matters? And why in the world to you does that feel like an accusation? And how many guns does one man need? And how many children have to bleed and die before we concede? This math, it ain't adding up right, but I'm holding out hope that this is all some passing temporary insanity. I'm holding out hope. Deep inside we'll recognize our common humanity. I'm holding out hope. The way things are is not the way that they have to be. No, I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I looked for answers on my TV. I saw a man who said he worked for me. Then he offered a new brand of history. Told me not to believe what my own eyes see. Took to the streets to get the news. Got hit with about 1 million views, but 999,999 were so afraid they couldn't even hear what the first one said. I found a quiet place where I could listen to a soft-spoken preacher teaching something different. That's less about me, and it's more about you. And he wept for a heart that was broken into, and as his tears fell, they watered the roots of a tree that bore the most beautiful fruit. And he cried out begging the hungry to try it, but since it was free, nobody would buy it. That this is all some passing temporary insanity. Holding out hope. Deep inside we'll recognize our common humanity. Holding out hope. The way things are is not the way that they have to be. No, I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. So hold on when you feel you're getting tired. Hold on when you feel you're getting tired. 'Cause I know you can get tired. Lord knows how I get tired. Lord, when you feel you're getting tired, your Lord's The other day, he saw me and just turned away. I asked him whether he'd be coming back. He said we killed every prophet we'd ever had. Well, I refuse to believe that all is lost and justice is dead as Jesus on his cross. So since love's resurrection is who we need, then this is the gospel I choose to believe. I'm holding out hope that this is all some passing temporary insanity. I'm holding out hope. Deep inside we'll recognize our common humanity. I'm holding out hope. The way things are is not the way that they have to be. No, I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. Holding out hope. Holding out hope.
Yeah!
Wow.
Thank you,
Wow.
thank you.
No question.
Wow.
If they ask for an
I feel
encore,
horrible
is that
coming
okay?
after that.
Totally.
Like-
Maybe you can sing. I'll play the piano. Let's
Guys,
do that.
Excuse
Let's
me.
do that.
Excuse me.
Is it
Excuse
me
me.
you're looking for? Because I'm happiness.
No, I'm looking for you.
And compassion.
Yes, I have.
And you can train your brain.
After this experience, I have
to be
only
happy
one
and
word
compassionate.
to share with all of you, and I would like to know your take on it. Encore!
Encore!
Do you like it? So join me. Encore! 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 It's working! Encore! 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 Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow.
We just church people, do y'all mind?
King Jesus is a listening when you pray. King Jesus is a listening when you pray. Waiting to hear you, comfort and cheer you. King Jesus is a listening when you pray. King Jesus is a listening when you pray. King Jesus is a listening when you pray. Waiting to hear you, comfort and cheer you. King Jesus is a listening when you pray. If I hold my peace, my Jesus will be coming for me one day. King Jesus is listening when you pray. He's got power in his hands and he's taking me away. King Jesus is listening when you pray. If I hold my peace, my Jesus will be coming for me one day. King Jesus is listening when you pray. He's got power in his hands and he's taking me away. King Jesus is listening when you pray. Oh, King Jesus is listening. Oh, listening when you pray. King Jesus is listening.
I believe that we can end racism.
King Jesus is listening. King Jesus is listening. King Jesus is listening. Listen, 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 listen. King Jesus is listening when you pray.
Nothing to say. Go eat lunch. Go have fun.
Yeah,
That's
go
it.
eat lunch.
That's
See you
it.
at 3.
That's it. Wow, 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 wow. Woo! Woo-hoo!
Yeah!
Wow! Wow!
Thank you so much.
There's nothing
Thank
else
you
to
so
say. Go have lunch, hug each other, hug yourselves, and we'll see you later. Bye. Wow. Gee.